Excited today because I am interviewing Dr. Meyleen Velasquez. She is a licensed social worker in the perinatal and infant mental health field, which are two of my dearest and darnest areas of psychology. And we're here to talk about Meyleen's career and that trajectory and that framework, as well as this incredible book that she wrote, What Therapists Need to Know About Perinatal and Early Relational Health, a guide to anti-oppressive counseling with caregivers, babies, and young children. I have to say, I wish I had this book when I was in grad school, an internship and postdoc. It would have changed my life. And so I'm so excited that it's out for all of the therapists in training who work with little ones and who work with moms. This book is incredible, and we'll get into it in a bit, but the fact that it's just filled with so much research is amazing. I don't know how long it must have taken you to go through all of that and give us exactly what we needed to read through this book. And then the part that I love even more is the questions, the reflective questions. A lot of times, especially when we're starting out, we don't recognize all of the belief systems that we have. We go into, for many of us, we go into this field wanting to help and wanting to be the savior and to be the bearer of the really good information that's going to help everyone solve their problem. And what we don't realize is that oftentimes we can create some harm, even if it's not even meant to. So this is a very important topic, and I'm so glad that you're here to discuss it with us as fellow therapists and also for listeners who are parents looking for their own mental health support or support for their children. So, Meyleen, please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Eva, and thank you for the lovely and very kind raving about the book. It's definitely um, a work of love.
Yeah.
Like anything that is created by humans, we put so much love and dedication and heart into the things that we do, especially when they're gifts to the community. Um, Yeah, I am a social worker. I'm a former Miamian, which is where you and I first met. And I am currently living in Seattle, Washington. I'm an immigrant. I was born in Venezuela with immigrant parents. My parents are Cuban and Colombian. I grew up with my maternal side of the family, who are Cuban and lived in Venezuela for 27 years until we migrated here, mom, brother, and sister. I'm the eldest of a sibling group of three, which means something often in Black and Brown families and in Latino families, means something to be the eldest. Um, so, yeah, I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Yeah. I mean, just with that introduction, there's so much that we can take from, right? Being the oldest, we're usually like the mini moms in some ways. And we tend to be the helpers. We tend to be the ones to see we're that bridge between the parents and then the younger ones. Could you tell me a little bit about that experience growing up, if you would like to go there, about how that might have impacted
Yeah, yeah.
becoming a therapist?
There's so many layers, right, to upbringing and to my upbringing specifically. I'm older than my siblings by 7 and 9 years, which is a pretty big gap. And it became a lot more prominent once we came to the US. I was 10 years old at the time. My sister was three. My brother, I think, was one. Maybe he was still in diapers. Um, and yeah, my mom was single mom and came with some of the challenges that many immigrant families who are forced to migrate from their home countries experience. So we came with the clothes on our back, right? And my mom, once she became a full-time worker, was a full-time worker. There is the layers of trauma, intergenerational trauma that's carried, the trauma that I experienced in my family of origin, the trauma that my mom experienced in her family of origin and the trauma that my grandmother experienced. So there's a lot of stories of pain and resilience, that that paint how we interacted with each other, and what the role of the eldest child was, because my role, at one point, was the parent, right? And so it's, not every Latino family is the same in that way, right? Where yes, you do take a responsibility, a different responsibility in many immigrant families, especially at the eldest. Um, but not everyone becomes like the main parent for some point. So I have some beautiful memories when I think back of being little, of going downtown with my siblings every weekend and spending the weekends at the library because I just wanted us to get out of the house. Or, when we had a little bit of money, because we also grew up in poverty, being able to take the bus down to the beach and having enough money to also come back from the beach. We went downtown often because we can take was it the mini rail, the tri rail, one of those. It was free to make it from where we live to downtown and to come back. Um, and then, when I think about what has happened for me after coming out of childhood, it's like the layers of healing, right? To not be the person that is then the one in charge of resolving everything. Because when you grow up in an environment where the expectation is on you to answer things, to be the co-parent, to respond to things, to have the answer, to have like the wisdom, um, it gets ingrained in us a little bit, where then we end up reenacting those patterns in everything that we do. And so constantly reminding myself, like, okay, something needs to be done. Is it my role to do it? And if it is my role to do it, how much? How much of me do I give? And how do I hold myself in mind in the midst of it? Um, so it is not by a coincidence that I became a mental health provider, working with perinatal folks and their little ones.
I love what you just said. It sounds so simple. What is being asked? How much of it can I do or want to do? And how do I take myself into consideration? And there's so many ways we could talk about that with boundaries. We could talk about that in dynamics of relationships. But right, when we grow up, caretaking in all of the ways, whether it's physically, whether it's emotionally, psychologically, for other people in the family. And that's not to say that other members don't do the caretaking because they're involved in the family. But when we grow up with that mentality that it's on us, then as we grow up and do a lot of this inner work of awareness, of reflection, we have to go through that list of questions to keep us almost in check, because the default is to overgive or overfunction or put our needs to the side, because the other need of being that person can overshadow the need to just be you. And there's no, in my experience, and correct me if I'm wrong, there's no time period where that particular question is so apparent than in the perinatal and postpartum aspect. Because when you become a mother, when you have a baby, then all of the things that you used to just do for you, and if you're used to being the caretaker for others and other adults, then when you're faced with that notion of, oh my gosh, but now there's this vulnerable little thing who depends on me 100% for survival, I don't even know how to take care
Mhm.
of myself sometimes. How am I even going to take care of this little thing and make sure that they're happy and well fed? And all of these questions come up, that just going through that, okay, well, what belongs to me? What belongs to someone else? How much can I give? Even how much of that can I actually show up and give is crucial
Mhm.
for
Yeah.
survival, but also just living through and passing through these moments, right?
Hmm. There is so much upheaval that happens during the whole process of fertility planning, whether a baby is a surprise or whether it's a planned. pregnancy, whether we're adopting and bringing children in through the family that way. Pregnancy is complex, postpartum, and each of it requires a different piece of us. Um, and then I'm thinking about like the big secret of adulthood, right? Like the secret that we're all holding on to, which is like none of us know what we're doing. Like we're all just figuring it out, right? So as like you are just like figuring it out, now you have to figure it out for someone else, right? With this expectation that you're just going to know how, that your body is just going to be able to do everything, and that your mind is just going to be able to do everything, and that your heart is going to expand so you can withstand and do everything. It's such a lie that we get sold.
It is. And I remember when I gave birth to my daughter, Raquel, who's now 13, almost 14, my
Raquelita.
grandfather said, yeah, Raquelita, my grandfather said, but why are you taking courses? Like your grandmother never took any classes. And I was like, I want to be the perfect mom. What do you mean? I need to know how to change her and feed her. And then for work, I'm a lactation educator. So I need to practice the hold and the football hold and all these things. And he's like, what do you think women did before any of these courses existed? They just didn't. And I was like, yeah, fair. And yet many of them didn't. And there were issues along the way, right? Now, I laugh about this because the first time I changed the diaper, I put it on backwards and we had some mishaps. And you know this because I was there with you and I came with you to the PSI conference afterwards many years ago. I don't remember how long ago that was. But it was after I had my second child that we went to this conference and I spoke for the first time about my postpartum depression. And it was years later. And it doesn't matter how prepared we are. Sometimes we just don't know how to handle the incredible feelings and changes that come from the soul. I believe it's nothing that we plan for, like, oh, I'm going through a very happy moment and be depressed or be anxious or have really scary thoughts. It's things that come up and come out, and the fact that there are therapists now who are trained and training to work with such a vulnerable population is so important. It's the safety and the future of our society, right?
Yeah, it is very heartening to see all these spaces that are focused on supporting perinatal therapists, because it means that there's so many more of us, even just in the past 6 years, how the
Mhm.
landscape has changed. And still, we hear from folks that it's hard to find a perinatal provider, right? So even though we have more resources, the need is vast.
What do you think that's about? Why do you think that is?
Oh,
Is there
there's so
such a
many
scarcity with
things. Um, I want to say that one of the biggest challenges that I face as a provider, well, this is not one of the biggest challenges. I'm exaggerating, but this is a challenge, a financial challenge, which is the decision to take insurance or not. Right.
that?
And it's one as somebody that practices and tries to live through an anti-oppressive framework, one that has been like really difficult to battle with,
Yeah.
whether to take insurance, whether not to take insurance, and then how to also take care of myself and support myself with the fees that providers are paid under insurance, with the concerns of clawbacks, where all of a sudden, the insurance paid you for a year working with somebody, and they go back and they're like, surprise, the client had a different insurance, or, we mispaid you, and now, there's $1 million that you owe, and you need to pay it within whatever amount of time.
Mhm,
Hey, like
mhm.
those are pretty scary things. I remember depositing the last time I deposited a check, I took a picture. I should probably show it to you. But it's like in the check, in like the summary of the check said that this was not a guarantee of payment.
Okay.
It's just like
It's
so
incredible.
like
Yeah.
how you imagine anywhere else, like your boss pays you, and then like in the check it says it's not a guarantee of payment, I can take this back at any moment. Like, how do you feel safe? And
Mhm.
then if you as a provider are not feeling safe, right? If me as a provider, I'm not feeling safe, then how am I going to lend my sense of safety to the folks that I work with, whether they're providers or clients? I
Exactly. It's
can't.
a parallel process.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel it is in most things, right? Because when we take care of the mother who's just given birth, or just like you said, and thank you for raising that awareness of adoptive parents and other parents who go through other processes to be, or other individuals who go through those processes to become parents. Um, they're in such a vulnerable state just as much as the baby or the child that is coming into the family.
Mhm.
And if we cannot hold ourselves accountable for the ways that we manage and handle ourselves, then that is what we are, however you want to call it, energetically, transferently, projectingly, whatever word you want to use, putting that into the therapy session,
Mhm.
consciously or not. And I agree with you. When I decided to stop taking insurance, it was a good couple of months of me grappling through that situation and those decisions because I felt like I was letting people down. And
Yeah.
I didn't consider how I was letting myself down by continuing to follow a system that, yes, could decide at any moment. And also the confidentiality piece where
Mhm.
you can
That's
get
a big one.
audited
Mhm.
and then some random person is reading up on your client's personal stuff. And that's
Yeah.
not, it just doesn't sit right.
Yeah.
And
And deciding whether whether these services are needed or not, which is
right,
also so bizarre how like I'm the one with a relationship with this individual, so it should be the client and I deciding
right,
together whether there needs to be more services or not, whether right, not someone else. And then I can step back and understand how that makes sense, right? How the system, the insurance system makes sense in this kind of um, westernized system that we live in. And at the same time, like trust providers and trust people.
right.
Mm.
And as we're talking, I'm thinking we both trained at the Institute for Child and Family Health, and we were in community mental health centers as part of our training. And in that way, for therapists who are working in these sorts of centers or taking insurance and who really need to read your book, um, how can we help them navigate through that? Because for some people, hey, that's what makes sense and that works, and all the power to you. But for those who are in these types of jobs, right? How do we help them feel that safety in the sessions? Or maybe
Yeah.
it's a conversation to be had at another time, but it just gets me thinking.
Yeah, it's so complex because I wish that there was an answer, like
Yeah,
one right answer, because it's so individualized. Because everybody's financial circumstances and life circumstances and identities, right, and what they're holding is different.
right,
So for somebody like me, like for me, I can't take insurance. That's a very sad line that I've written in what's the saying? Sad line in the sand. I
and
don't know. There's a saying in English that I can't remember, but it's the boundary that I've drawn for me. Um, but somebody else might be in a similar financial and social location situation as myself and decide differently.
right,
So there's no right or wrong way. It's more about right the idea of knowing yourself and reflecting and what is it that I really need? What is it that I want to do? What's gonna serve me, right? And how am I going to give back to my community? Right. I'm looking at the mix of the idea of self-care, but also community care, which is so important. And so how am I going to care for my community in a way that makes sense for me? And then figuring out like how that goes. Because if I'm betraying myself, by making whatever decision, right? If I'm betraying myself, then I think that that's going to impact my relationship with the folks that I'm working with. It's going to impact my relationships at home as well. I'm going to be frustrated. I'm going to be more tired. There's going to be, when we self-betray, there is, we can call them symptoms. There's a result. Something's going to happen, right? Something's going to shake up. You're going to forget appointments. You're going to get really sleepy in sessions. You're going to be annoyed by the folks that you're serving. You might be at risk for burnout, for compassion fatigue, right? All the different pieces. So it's all about figuring out what is it that I need so that I can be the best that I can be for the folks that I'm serving.
And that's exactly what we talk about in therapy with moms. How can that mom create that self-care so she could give back to her community, aka family? Because when she's self-betraying, then what comes up are the symptoms in
Yeah,
her, the baby, or the
yeah,
toddler, or the child.
yeah. It's so much more complex, right? When we think about a mom, when we think about a perinatal person, because sometimes, most times, many times, circumstances of caring for a child call to self-betray, right? You can't be like, all right, baby, I'm gonna take 2 hours, you chill, and I'm gonna go like have a cup of tea, right? Like that conversation cannot be had with babies. So it becomes that much harder because inherently in the caregiving dynamic, there is a certain amount of self-betrayal and putting yourself to the side that is required. How much of that and how folks are balancing it depends on so many things. And one of them being primarily social location. What kind of support and access to resources do folks have?
Right.
Because life is going to look very different for somebody that um, can afford a live-in support,
Mm.
has maybe a multi-generational household where folks in the family are supporting and there's positive dynamics in the folks, right?
Right.
Life is going to look very different for them than like my mom as a single mom with her own things caring for 3 children, right? The level of self-betrayal that I imagine my mom had to do was probably pretty high.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure how she could have, being alone in the country, not speaking the language, like how could she have navigated that differently? Not sure. Yeah.
It's a lot. It's a lot.
Mhm.
And she's so brave.
Mhm.
So brave to have
Yeah.
taken on all of those challenges and those risks
Mhm.
with 3 kids. It's a lot.
Yeah.
And I was thinking just now, your background in social work, how it really can infuse the practice of psychology. Because if you can actually go into that a little bit, how does that then go into like the anti-oppressive theory that you talk so much about in the book, and how the pieces of society that we might not delve into as deeply when we're studying psychology, how that impacts then how you see the macro, the bigger picture when you're working with a client.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. I definitely, I'm grateful that that I chose to go towards the social work route because there is a bit more of a focus as to what are the systems that are impacting the individuals that we're working with and how do we work in multiple frames. And I'm equally grateful that I've been able to listen to the folks that I'm working with and also have had the privilege of coming across amazing mentors that have really helped me to understand anti-oppressive ways of being, um, and just expand my understanding, right? There's something that we hold when you're an immigrant, when you're a first generation or second generation, there's like pieces, right, of lived experience, of knowledge, of wisdom around diversity that we come with. And there's so much room for expansion and learning and looking at blind spots and examining your value system and questioning things that you were taught, especially being Latina around colorism and like all the xenophobia, right? All these messages um, that we come with. So, so yes, it's social work, but it's also the wisdom of others that I've been privileged to connect with and learn from, and continue learning from, because this is a lifelong journey.
It is. It is. And
Mhm.
you're absolutely right. Sometimes I make a joke if I forget how to say something properly. Well, I'm an immigrant. And people look at me funny. And because I don't look like an immigrant and I speak perfect English. But when I came here from Venezuela, I spoke 2 sentences worth of English. And it does impact because you are, in a way, an outsider looking in and figuring out you're doing the field work. Like, how do I live here? How do I make friends here? How do I just live? And it doesn't really matter how long you've been in one country, or even if you move around and live in many, there is still that part of you that you left behind and the part of you that you bring with you and then can connect or disconnect depending on where you're at. At least that's how
Mhm.
that's been my experience of it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, were you gonna say something?
No, I think you were going to say something, and I don't want to cut off your idea.
Oh, I was gonna say that when I was looking through and reading parts of the book, because I didn't get through all of it, but
You didn't read all of it in 3 days.
I know. Yeah. But what I got through, I was like, damn, this is so good. Um, I felt like the parts that you were putting in there were just like very nice and polite, but needles to pop the bubbles. Like,
Mm.
come on, you guys, get out of this shell. Really look at what you're doing and how you're doing it. And that's why I love the questions because it's done with so much grace, with so much compassion. But it's like I felt you kind of being like, okay, wake up, get ready.
Yeah, yeah, there has to be the call to stretch us past our comfort.
Yeah.
We're all really connected with our value system and our belief system. And so much of it is unconscious, and yet there's still this conscious pieces where we are like, what I believe is the truth. And so to get into a space of, oh, there's a possibility that what I believe it about myself, about my community, about the world is filtered through my experience, is filtered through all these pieces that I just came into the world with. And that's hard, right? And in order for us to challenge that, there has to be, at least this is so connected with my approach of being, that there has to be a sense of gentleness and like loving holding of the yuck that we carry so that then we can look at it. Because if somebody comes at us too harsh, that might not be the style that we're used to. And so this is where I say this is just my personality. I like for people to, I'm a gentle soul. If you are mean to me, I will cry. Like I'm just like I'm a gentle soul. So I'm like I like to be gentle to other people and encouraging to examine themselves. Um, yeah. So going back to that idea that there's not one right way, right? There's not one right way to question yourself or to ask the questions or to invite others. It's all about finding your secret sauce and then wondering where your secret sauce comes from.
Yeah, it's a really it's just a very deep awareness in getting to, like you said, with a lot of humility, looking at the ick. We all have it for one reason or the other. We all carry some sort of area that doesn't function as well as other areas of our life or of our personality. Um, and then within that, there's so many gifts. Because once we understand it, once we unpack it, then we can really see why they're there and how they can be of use to us and to the dynamics and to the relationships. Um, And I love that you're gentle because it's true. As I know you personally, but also as I've seen you in your career, that gentleness makes it easier to talk about these topics of oppression because in and of itself, we might not want to, right? But they're inherent. And I don't know if you want to go into that a bit more, because some of them are so covert. And
Mhm.
I know that as I was reading this, I started thinking, my gosh, what about that time? Was I being oppressive and I didn't mean to say something? So then you start coming
Yeah.
back and not in like, oh, you're a bad person, you're a terrible little girl, go get you're punished in the corner,
Yeah.
but okay, how can I be a better therapist? And also
Mhm.
checking in with my beliefs, you know? So
Yeah.
amazing that you're bringing the covert out.
Mhm. Yeah, and the invitation to look at the parts of ourselves that we don't often look at, and like you said, um, it doesn't mean that all of a sudden we're this, right? I'm careful to say it doesn't mean that we're a bad person, and the reason I'm trying to not use that phrase, I'm trying to come up with a different phrase, is that so much of what keeps us in an oppressive or a racist and kind of a not aware, not doing the work frame is the need to hang on to the idea of being a good person. And it's like, well, of course I'm not racist. I'm a good person.
Yeah.
And this is not about being good or bad. This is about understanding that all of us have these yucky parts. That they're deeply in us. They're the air that we breathe. They're the water that we are all swimming in. I have a colleague that calls it the stew, the stew that we're in.
Yeah.
And we're all in it. And so I'm just trying to be mindful of not using, like it's not a label, right? Having a yuck doesn't mean that you are this. It just means that you are human. This is like as real as making mistakes. We're gonna make them. If we were to examine our conversation up to now, moment by moment, there's probably something that I said wrong. There's probably some belief system that I need to come back and kind of challenge. Where did that come from? Why did I think that? And it doesn't mean that we're like, I don't know if you can curse here, but effed up people.
You could do what you
Okay,
want.
so it doesn't mean we're fucked up people. It just means that we're humans who are doing the work and trying to figure it out. And because we're doing the work, we're going to make mistakes and fail and find out nasty things along the way. Because this is like if we had never rollerbladed and then we're learning to rollerblade.
Yeah.
Um, Only the stakes are higher.
Yeah. This is a very important topic to me for many reasons, but because I identify as a Jewish woman with all of the things that have been going on uh, between Israel and Palestine, it's been interesting to be in therapy sessions with individuals who have very strong beliefs one way or the other. And even not just in personal conversations with people. And when for me the work, my personal work has been, okay, when do I interject? When can I state, okay, how is this a projection or not of what you are experiencing in your own personal life that you see it and the word manifesting, I don't mean in the spiritual sense, but you're seeing it live and in
Mhm.
that scenario. Um, because like you said, we all have beliefs based on personal experiences, based on things that we read that make sense, maybe right, maybe wrong. But learning to navigate through that is super important because we
Mhm.
can't pretend like, oh, I'm good either way. Whatever you say is fine.
Yeah. Yeah. And the idea of colluding, right? Because when we don't say something, when we stay quiet, then we become participant to the harm.
Yeah.
Um, I'm also somebody that has pretty strong beliefs, pretty strong anti-racist, anti-oppressive beliefs. And so when I work with folks, whether it's supervisees or therapy clients, um, at the first meeting, and usually when they read my bio, there's a good sense about who I am and what I believe in. And so I've had situations that have arisen in therapy where somebody has shared something and it's been harmful, and I've called them in and I've said, if we're gonna work together, then we're gonna address this. And it is up to you. It's not me enforcing, but I do draw that line when it comes to racism and oppression. If it's showing up, we're gonna look at it.
Yeah.
Whether the person wants to look at it or not, that is their choice. But I am not gonna collude, and I am not gonna self-betray and
Mhm.
pretend that I can, not hear or not see something harmful. I also, that is part of the way that I practice. I don't think it's solely to social workers, but I do know that there's some backing, right, that I have in the code of ethics, even though I have my own concerns about the code of ethics, but there's some backing in the code of ethics that I have for, when you hear harm, you call it in. And I would call it in the same way that I would call in if I'm working with a caregiver and all of a sudden I'm hearing unrealistic expectations of their
Right.
kids that are then causing frustration. It's no different. This is we're gonna look at it all. And if that's your jam, then let's be in it. If that's
Yeah.
not your jam, then let's figure out what you need. Because I don't want you to self-betray, and I'm not going to. Yeah.
Love that. I love that because you're authentic. You practice what you preach, and that's what someone gets when they're meeting with you for supervision, for therapy, for whatever kind of relationship, right?
Mm.
And that is, I believe, the highest form of being. And not that there's lower, but when we're authentic, and lower meaning like less important, but when we're in authenticity and we're speaking our truth and we're embodying it and we're living it, and then when we make that mistake or when we're ignorant about something, we go and correct it. Again, it's not from this, oh, I need to be perfect, I'm not good enough, but more like, okay, there's a part of me that is jutting out a bit. I either gotta put it in place or take it out or whatever I need to do because I have to embody, because then that helps me be more me. And it's incredible because that is, in my opinion, what we're all here at the end of the day to figure out. Like we all don't know what we're doing because we're all trying to figure out how is it that you're you and I'm me and I'm okay being me and you're okay being you and Pablito over there is good with him and John and David and Sarah and whoever else and are okay being them without this need to compare or contrast from one another. And uh, bringing it back to this time period and working with moms, isn't that such a big topic? Like, oh, but they all look so happy. How come I'm here crying and I don't want to be with my baby? Or
If
my
you
mom did it that way.
I was gonna say, like, if you look, you'll find the places on social media where people are talking about the truth, but you almost have to search for those, like people
Mhm.
that are like, this is what it's like being a mom of a 2-month old, and no one is okay at 2 months old postpartum. And then on the other hand, you have like everyone who's posting like the beautiful moments, which
Yeah,
can, even if people know, because I hear this from folks often, like, I know it's not 100% of the time that this mom has it all together, but then they post this beautiful pictures and I look at my kitchen and my kitchen's a mess, or then they post this and like I look at mine and I'm like, it's bad. And it's like, yeah, we're all, maybe to some level we're all figuring it out, and then we're all like, tirando físico to each other, like pretending, like, oh, what, how do you say that? Like showing off. Yeah.
yeah, and we don't, and I love that we can talk like that. I remember in the beginning of my career, I didn't want any client of mine to know anything that was going on in my life. I was trying to keep up this, I'm a blank slate and I just reflect back to you. You know, what they teach us. I can't really believe that they teach us that. It's like,
It's
are you
so
kidding?
like I learned I had a spiel that was like, during our time together, there's gonna be things and questions that are gonna arise for you about our work. And you might ask them and you might notice that I won't answer them. It's like, how was I saying this to people? They must have been like, oh my God, this lady.
Yeah, I remember going to class and learning how to you answer those questions. And I was like, what kind of
Like
power
simple
game is
stuff
this?
like, hey, how old are you? You're like,
And tell me why that's
what's
important.
coming up for you?
And so here we are, right? And I love this because this is what it is to be an authentic therapist. Because, okay, you're going to come, or, client's going to come and share all of the things that they're so afraid and so protective of sharing with the rest of the world. And they're going to come and tell us about it. But then they're going to ask a simple question like, how old are you? And we're not going to answer. How are we teaching them relational health? And you talk about that in the book, right? How
Yeah.
is that then? Perhaps, I don't know if you agree, is that being oppressive?
I think it all depends. Um, because everybody's trained so different. But I find that for me, right, and it sounds like for you too, the most authentic way of being is to answer questions that come up. And I've never have I let me think for a second. I'm trying to think if I've been in a situation where a client I've been working with has asked me something that's like grossly inappropriate. And like I don't think so. Most things I answer, um, I am going to ask after I answer, like what's coming up for the person. Or sometimes if they ask me something juicy, I'm going to say, I'm going to answer that, but I'm wondering a little bit where that came from. Right. Um, so yeah, we can do both. I think the most important thing is like whatever providers decide to do when it comes to personal questions, that they are taking some time to think about how did I come up with this idea around disclosure. Does it make sense for me? Does it make sense for the folks that I'm working with? How do I know that it makes sense for them? Um, how is my decision informed? How has my decision changed from, when I was a baby therapist to, 5 years in, 10 years in, 15 years in? Has there been an evolution in how I show up? Just to like sit with a space of wondering. I just think that what you do is not always as important as the reason behind why
Yeah.
and then how. Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. And if you have a spiel that you give to clients around disclosure, just like sit with it and think about what it would be like if somebody told you that. Because I just think about mine, and mine is just so embarrassing.
I know. I'll tell you from my personal and professional, like me being on the client side and me being on the therapist side, when my therapists have shared something about their life, because it's pertinent to my session with them, I feel a connection that's not overly dependent on them. It's just, okay, here's a real person.
Yeah,
And maybe they
yeah.
didn't go through what I'm going through, or maybe they did, but okay, here there's that level of understanding. And
Mhm.
as a therapist, I'm a storyteller. I teach through story. So sometimes the stories are personal, and I always ask, can I share something? Um, and sometimes, it's about well, whatever kind of a story, because I want that person also to know you're not alone. You're
Mhm.
not the only one. And a lot of times when we have these feelings that are significant, that then culminate into depression, anxiety, bipolar, psychosis, these levels of dysfunction, this level of despair, the thought is, I'm the only one and no one gets me. And to be in that dark hole is one of the scariest things. unless you have that wherewithal.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I was gonna say there's a lot of power in the humility that you bring to the table as a therapist,
Mm.
because it shows the amount of bravery that it took to look at, I mean, just your introduction to your childhood and to understand the transgenerational gifts and traumas or all of it, and then to look at how that impacts you in your career, and then look at how that impacts you in relationships. Like, there's power there. It's not
Mm.
force, it's gentle, but it's,
Mm.
yeah, está una mujer hecha y derecha. Like, and she's ready to take it on with you. Like, let's go. You're like, okay.
I try to be. Sometimes I feel a bit where like all like en vez de derecha, sí, me siento. Pero but trying, right? It's like with everything. All of us have had to do some work on ourselves. And once you see a piece of you and you truly see it, you can't unsee it. Mm. Whether it's, I don't know, something about the way that you're parenting, something about the way of how you're treating yourself, your dynamic with your family of origin, dynamic with partners, which is a one that often comes up working with perinatal folks. Um, whether it is where you are on your antidepressive journey, like once you see it, it is hard to unsee it. And that's a gift, right? It makes you work because you're like, okay, there it is again. There's the voice that tells me I'm not good enough. There it is. Once you see it, then you can have like that sharp focus to to recognize it, to work on it. And the working on it is the recognition. Sometimes just saying to yourself, oh, there's that narrative again. Like that's enough. Because then
Mm.
you're not, just like the narrative comes up and you react this way and it comes back up and you're like, oh, you're a little bit more grounded in yourself.
So you have a squishy,
I do. I have my fidgeters.
a fidgeter. Do you, because you worked in play therapy for many years, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
You still incorporate play into your sessions? Is that an
Oh my
aspect of doing?
goodness. Um, yes. Yes. When it comes to working with perinatal folks, it's really important when there's time, when it makes sense, to really think about like what are some of the ways that you're bringing fun, love, and nurturing with your little one.
Mm,
So most of my work these days is just individual work with adults. But in thinking about like what are the ways that they're creating fun, not just for themselves, but with their little ones. And there is a chapter on the book on play and how to integrate play into working with babies, right? So that there is like that intersection between like perinatal folks and how they're holding the baby in mind, and then infant mental health folks and how they're holding the parent in mind, not only in the context of being this child's parent, but also in the context of like they're an individual. And yes, they hold this identity of parent, but that's not the only identity that they hold. And it's very important for us I think, in play therapy field and the infant mental health field to really kind of open up the lens of
yeah.
how we think about engaging caregivers. Mm.
One of my biggest pet peeves, and that says a lot about me, is when moms speak in the third person. Mommy's going to take a nap. Mommy's going to get a cup of coffee. Mommy's going to put your shoes on now. And when I hear that in therapy, I'm like, who's mommy? Where are you? And many moms don't really catch it. And I'm like, how? It's creating this emotional and psychological space between you, the person, fully as mom being part of that identity, and then your child. And understanding that framework also for her, that she needs to create that space where she's mommy, not
Yeah.
Eva, it's like, okay, here is a separate entity who comes in, and no one speaks in third person other than moms or dads. I haven't heard anyone say, Meyleen likes coffee, can she have some? Or me say, Eva wants to talk to Meyleen for a little longer. Like, we don't speak in third
Yeah,
person.
like in regular colloquial ways,
Yeah,
we don't. Yeah.
but parents
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
Yeah,
hmm I think something that I really had to work on is that when I first started working in the field of infant mental health, we wouldn't, we'll be like, oh, the mom I'm working with, oh, like my mom's,
mm,
and all right, come here, mom, and like, wait,
yeah,
like it is sweet, and like where, like how is, because language is really important, and language is so connected to the mental narrative that we are carrying, right?
yeah.
So when I call folks mommy or mom and they're not my mom, right? Like how am I thinking about all their different parts as we're working together?
Exactly. And then inadvertently, adding to that layer that this mom might be holding of I have to only be in this role because it's not even her, it's a role, it's a part
Mhm.
of the identity. It's not,
Yeah.
yeah. The other day, a couple of things about that, but the other day I had a couple of sessions where it was a similar vein of the child expecting the mom to always be happy and always want to do whatever the child wanted. And these were different sessions, but it was the same theme in the same week. And the mom also referring to herself in the third person and feeling exasperated that when she's moody or frustrated or tired, that she can't express it because she gets a lot of pushback. And it's inadvertently part of the problem when that identity, in my opinion, and I'd like to hear what you have to say about that. If she sees herself only as mom, and this mom is the perfect mom who's always available, always in a good mood, robotic, and da 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 da, then when she has something separate from the child, then she's now being bad mommy. So she can't be tired, she can't be sad or frustrated. And either she begins to reject, resent, or hide
Mhm.
how she's feeling for the sake of
Yeah.
good mommy. But the repercussions are always there, correct?
Mhm. Yeah. I think we're going back to that idea of self-betrayal,
Yeah.
right? That when there's parts of ourselves that we push down for one reason or another. There's so much something I like to say that like we get sold a romanticized version of parenthood that doesn't exist. It's not real. Um, and so many people buy into it.
Yeah.
And I think it's precisely because everyone is suffering and because parenthood is so hard. It's beautiful parts. Otherwise, as a humanity, we wouldn't keep doing it, right? Like there's beautiful aspects of it, but it's hard. It's very, very hard. And precisely because it's so hard, we don't talk about it.
Mhm.
I think it's too close to home. Yeah. And so then folks find themselves, right, in this romanticized version that society is selling them about parenthood that's present in social media and the cultural narratives that we carry. Because for many immigrant communities, being a mother is the highest calling, right? And right, there is like this immense responsibility that parents are holding. There's no if, ands, or buts about that. But what happens when, right, this is your highest calling and it's the thing that you were born to do, and then you actually get in it and you feel horrible, your breasts hurt, your body, everything hurts. You're like, you're not sure how you're alive. You're disconnected from your child. You've
Yeah.
stayed up 2 hours to try to get your baby to sleep, and finally they close their eyes and you walk out, and then your heart's broken because you hear the cry again, right? So what happens when reality doesn't match? This is where the pain rises.
Yeah. I'm remembering lots of moments like that. And
Yeah.
it's to me, again, back to that authenticity, it's one of the portals for authenticity, because and I am one of those, I always wanted to be a mother. And um as I go through the decade and some of that, it's seeing these parts of me like, okay, why did I want to be such a caretaker? Who did I really want to care for? And am I doing that
Mhm.
as I'm now raising two children? And yes, we hold it at such a high degree because our kids, in my opinion, they represent many parts of us that we might have locked up in those cabinets that we don't want to think about. And then they come up and they're going through similar things that we went through as kids. And we're like, oh my God, how do we deal with this? Because I don't know how I dealt with it. And now you're going through it. And and so then it's this repeat. And I heard you say this, and I agree with you 1,000,000%. Time isn't linear. We're going through this cycle, this circle again and again and again, just so that we come back to this point, either through us or through someone we love,
Mhm.
work through it, deal with it until we come and
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. Especially when it comes to parenthood, right? And there's so much of folks' upbringing that is so vividly present in their relationship with kids. I saw a reel the other day, and um, it was like a woman pretending to be a daughter, right? And so she's like, as a kid, watching TV in bed, and the mom, like, she comes as a mom, and she like looks, and she's like, and it's like my mom, who worked really hard to give me a soft life, seeing me have a soft life. And I'm like, man, like, it was a funny clip, but I'm like, right,
You
we're
feel it,
mental health
of course.
providers. I'm
You feel
like,
it.
oh man, like, I wonder what this upbringing was like for this mom, and right, the ghost that she's now facing, seeing her daughter resting and wanting to see that and being happy and grateful to provide that. And then what happens if this mom doesn't have access to work on the part of her that's angry, that's jealous, that's frustrated, that's hurt because she didn't get that experience? And that is right for those of us that have complex trauma.
Yeah.
That is the day to day.
And also the one who in her mind thinks superseding or going above what mom did. How does she handle the guilt that she got the chances that mom didn't? It's both, right? Right? The one
Yeah.
who's like, I sacrificed for you to have it, and then the one saying, oh my gosh, now I'm living through your sacrifices. And that's huge,
Yeah.
huge. Because that could make or break a lot of aspects in a
Mhm.
woman's everything
Mhm.
if she hasn't worked through that part as well. I mean,
Yeah.
we can talk about all of this for hours.
There's so many pieces, so much complexity.
Is there a favorite part to the book while you were writing it, or once it was done? Was
Oh,
there one part where you're like, oh, this is my baby, this chapter, this is the one, this is
oh
the
goodness.
and you don't have to put any of them down, but
I'm
if
like, I am
you don't
not
have to be oppressive.
sure. I am not sure. There's so much love. I had so much fun writing the intro. Uh,
It was so good though. I loved it.
it's so much fun writing it. Um, I think this is nothing. This is not a chapter, but I have a letter to readers at the end. It's a short letter. Because as I was writing, I really felt connected to this group of humans that I just imagine being with me in this journey.
Or can I read
Like
it?
looking for it. Yeah, you can read it.
Closing letter to readers?
Mhm.
Or do you have the book? Do you want to read it?
There it is. Okay. So it says, Dear reader, thank you for embarking on this journey with me. I felt your presence with me in spirit in each chapter. I hope the words in this text have supported your work and created space for reflecting deeper on your way of being with yourself and with others. As you consider expanding your perspective in serving perinatal caregivers and their little ones, please remember to hold yourself in mind with gentleness. We can recognize the areas for growth while being compassionate with ourselves in the process. We can contain both parts. However, as we tend to be our biggest critic, we might need reminders that kindness and compassion are a part of the journey. When we choose to take a stand against oppression, may the light of the morning sun illuminate our lives. May we choose to move towards the light. May we embrace the shadow. May we be well. May all benefit. With much appreciation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I got all those books.
Yeah, you know, it's it's a lifelong journey, and there's so much that we can do in community. And I think that maybe that's one of my biggest wishes for humanity is how we can lean into community, especially when times are really hard.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Eva.
Such a pleasure.